Do you want to know how to get that beautiful blurry background effect in your photos or videos? Stick around because today I'm going to show you 3 tips on how you can turn a busy photo like this into a photo that makes your subject stand out like this. When I started my photography journey, the very first thing I wanted to do was take some portraits where the subject was in front of this beautifully blurry background so that they'd pop. And more importantly, when I started, I was shooting a lot of fitness content, and if there's one thing you know about a gym, the background is littered with equipment and random people you don't want in your shot. The first thing I learned is that what lens you choose matters. On every lens, you'll find its maximum f-stop value, like these. This tells you the lens's widest possible aperture, and aperture is one of the most important factors that affect how blurry the background in a photo appears. Aperture refers to the size of the opening in the camera lens that allows light to enter the camera and hit the camera sensor. When you adjust the aperture, you are controlling how much light enters the camera and how much of the scene is in focus. A wide aperture, aka a low f-stop value such as f1.4, means that the lens's opening is larger, allowing more light into the camera. This results in a shallower depth of field, which means that the area in front of and behind the subject that is in focus is smaller. This creates a blurry background as the area behind the subject is now out of focus. On the other hand, a narrow aperture, aka a higher f-stop number, such as f16, means that the lens opening is smaller, allowing less light into the camera. This results in a deeper depth of field, which means that more of the scene is in focus, including the background. This creates a photo where everything is in focus with no blurry background. If you shop around for lenses for your camera, you'll notice that wider f-stop lenses, also called faster lenses, like f1.8, f1.4, f1.2, and even f0.95 get more and more expensive, like crazy expensive. That's because in order to get a larger aperture, you need more glass and a more complex lens design. But for our purposes, anything at around f1.8 will do the trick. And there are plenty of f1.8 lenses out there that are pretty affordable. For example, every camera system has its own Nifty 50, which is a 50mm prime lens that is usually an f1.8 aperture. At f1.8, you can start getting some really nice background blur. But aperture isn't the only thing that can give you that blurry background. But hey, first, if you're enjoying this video on how to get blurry backgrounds, I would love if you subscribe to this channel. Starting this week, every Tuesday, I'll be uploading these Technique Tuesday videos with more helpful tips on photography and videography. Plus, you'll be joining our growing community of photography enthusiasts who share a passion for taking better photos. Okay, so the second tip is distance. The distance between the subject and the background can change the shallowness of the depth of field, meaning that the closer the subject is to the camera, the thinner the depth of field will be, and the further the subject is to the camera, the wider the depth of field will be. Take a look. This video is shot at f4. You can see that when I'm closer to the camera, the background is actually quite out of focus, while just taking a few steps back, it looks like basically everything is in focus. So use this to your advantage if you want to blur your background, get closer to your subject. And the last tip is focal length. The focal length of the lens used can also affect the blur of the background. Take a look at this shot. A shorter focal length like 24mm, aka a wide-angled lens, looks very different from a tighter focal length like 200mm, aka a telephoto lens. Thanks to the effect of something called compression, making the background seem closer than it actually is, the background looks significantly more blurred. And this is typically why portrait photos, which are usually shot on tighter focal lengths like 50, 85, 135mm, look like they have a blurrier background, and that's because of that compression effect. And the best thing about these 3 tips today is that they apply to any camera you use, whether it's something like a dedicated camera like this one, or even just your smartphone. The reason why smartphone photos don't have a super blurry background, usually, unless you use something like artificial background blur like the iPhone's portrait mode, which is a whole nother video on its own, is because it has a tiny sensor. So even if the marketing says the iPhone 14 Pro has an f2 aperture, the tiny sensor combined with its wide-angled lens is the reason why it can't really get natural shallow depth of field. But if we learned anything from today, you can get up close to the subject and boom, you have blurry backgrounds. You just have to get uncomfortably close to your subject to achieve it. But that's it for this Technique Tuesday. If you want to learn all about aperture and the other 2 settings that will let you master your camera and become a better photographer, check out this video I made on how to shoot in manual mode. And As always, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.